Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this first webinar on our request for applications. We'd like to give everyone a chance to join, so we're going to wait for 2 more minutes before starting with our slideshow. Just bear with us. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. Again, this is the Native American Agriculture Fund Request for Applications webinar. This is our first of 3. We're glad that you joined for this one. If anything happens and you fall off of the webinar, we'd like to help you get reconnected. The best way to do that is to call our phone number. I'm going to give it to you now, 479-445-6226. Again, that is 479-445-6226. If you have any trouble during this webinar, please call that number and our staff will help you get reconnected. I'd also like to mention again that this is the first of 3, so we welcome you to come back for our next 2. You can find the details online, and this will be recorded and available on our website tomorrow. Now I'd like to hand this over to our CEO, Janie Hipp. She will walk through the request for applications and address all the areas. You're welcome to submit questions. You can do so by going to your GoToWebinar control panel. It should be the tall rectangular panel that popped up when you logged on. If you look in the area, it says questions at the bottom. You can type your question there and we will receive it and we will address those after Janie has gone through the PowerPoint. If at any time you have any questions, please contact us there or call our number 479-445-6226. Janie?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join us for the webinar this afternoon. We're going to be covering quite a bit of ground today. First of all, I just want to let you know how excited we are to actually have the opportunity and the honor to serve as a part of the Native American Agriculture Fund staff and leadership. Our trustees, we acknowledge them and the important role that they are playing in this entire process. And we just want you to know that we're doing our best at moving as quickly as we can to realize the promise of the Native American Agriculture Fund. I'm going to go through quite a few slides. They're going to be available to you later. They'll be available in addition to this recording on our website. There's a lot of resources already on the website. Many of you hopefully are going through it and making notes, and I bet you have some questions. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can today, but at the end of the day, don't worry about not getting your question answered today. What we can do is be as responsive as possible if you just let us know through the email system, and Carly will come back on later and share that email address with you and our telephone. We have staff that are ready to answer any questions you might have and help you solve any problems you might have. Going back to what Carly said previously, please submit the questions via the questions box. We'll do our best to answer those. And we have a lot of resources on the website already, as I mentioned, but we'll have this archived presentation on the website, and we'll just make ourselves available. So many of you already know that the Native American Agriculture Fund was an entity that was created from the final Cypre Fund settlement of the Keepsigal litigation. You can actually go through the history of that litigation by going to that website address that we have on this screen. The NAAF Board of Trustees, and that's Native American Agriculture Fund. I'm going to call it NAAF just because it helps me to move through these slides a little bit quicker. But the NAAF Board of Trustees all got together and executed the trust agreement that set us on our path. They did that in late July of 2018. The trust agreement governs all the operations of NAAF as an organization, and it sets the stage for our grant-making functions. And if you want to, and I really suggest that you do, take a look at our trust agreement. It's on our website. It has been from day one of the launch of our website. Please feel free to call us at any time with any questions you may have about it, but it's very specific. And it was an outgrowth of the settlement of the final settlement of the Keepsigal litigation. So it is our guiding document. This slide shows you a little bit of what was an over 19 years of the Keepsigal litigation that led to the creation of NAAF. The case was filed in 1999 on behalf of Native farmers and ranchers for discrimination by the USDA Farm Loan Program. It eventually led to a $680 million settlement fund, in addition to an $80 million in debt relief fund, tax relief, and various equitable relief, in addition to changes in the farm loan program policies at USDA. Following completion of the claims process and payment of all the successful claims through the first round, approximately $380 million was left over, and that led to a second appeals process for the actual case, which ultimately led to a second payment made to each prevailing claimant, and ultimately led to the creation of a FastTrack Fund of $38 million set up for immediate distribution to benefit Native farmers and ranchers. The actual FastTrack Fund process, some of you who are on this call may have actually participated in that as an applicant for those 38 million funds, but that process was completed back in 2016, and the outcome of that was filed under seal with the court, and it was released, and the funds were released to the FastTrack Fund grantees in late 2018. So there's a lot that's been happening to bring about where we are now, and to give life to not only the second payment that occurred through the ongoing settlement of the case, but also the $38 million in FastTrack funds that were awarded to a set of organizations that competed for those funds a couple of years ago. That brought us up to where we are today. Approximately $266 million was used from the remaining funds to establish the Native American Agriculture Fund for a period of 20 years. So it's 19 years and counting at this point. The fund will expire in September of 2038. We're a 20-year spin-down private charitable trust. And according to the trust agreement, we were required and did receive 501c3 status ourselves early this year. So the funds were actually transferred to NAAF in December of 2018. These things take a while. And the RFA was launched, the request for applications, our first, was launched not too many days ago, August the 1st, 2019. And through it, NAAF is seeking to fund a wide variety of projects in 2019. The future requests for applications may differ in their focus and in their priority areas and in their funding amounts. But the trustees and our team here felt it was important to get these things moving and get the funds moving out to where they can make them the most impact. And so that's why we're here today, and that's where we're going. But your input is really important. And so there is a survey that's been on our website from day one as well. And we continually see new input on that survey about what you think and what you would like to tell the trustees and our team in terms of what's needed where you are and what you think the next step should be with regard to bringing life to what the trust agreement says, but also NAAF itself. So please go ahead and give us your input through that survey if you haven't. If you actually look at the trust agreement in section 7, it outlines very specifically the trust's mission. The mission is to make grants to eligible grant recipients described in the trust agreement to fund the provision of business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to Native farmers and ranchers to support and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. This slide shares with you who our trustees are. If you just take a moment to take a look at who they are. They're from all over. And we're very proud and excited to work with all of them. And they are providing a lot of hard work and leadership around helping the NAAF organization to stand up, but also to really focus around what our strategic focus should be moving forward. I won't go over their names. You can read those. They're also highlighted on our website. Here are some really important dates. We released the request for applications August 1. It closes September the 30th at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Today is our first webinar, but we're going to have a second and a third, as indicated. The second is the 20th of August, and the third will be September the 3rd at the same time, 2 to 4 p.m. Central. So if you have to leave and you have to roll off of this one, either look at the archived recording or just show up for one of the other ones. And the registration links are on our website as well. But don't forget, and go ahead and put on your calendar right now, the closing date and time, which is September 30, 11:59 p.m. Central Time. We will have the line open to accept your application, but at the stroke of midnight, that's it. The application period will close. If you also look at the trust agreement in section 8A, the eligible grant recipients are identified there as well. They are, and there's 4 different ones. There's 3 located on this slide, and then the next slide shares with you the 4. There's 4 major grant recipient eligible entities. The first is nonprofit organizations with IRS Section 501c3 tax exempt status. But if such status has not been achieved yet, then organizations can apply through a fiscal sponsor if they've not received their official word from IRS that they have achieved and been awarded 501c3 tax exempt status. So I think I mentioned it elsewhere in this application webinar, but if you are part of a community organization that is just really early and you haven't gotten, your 501c3 paperwork put together yet, then find a 501c3 with whom to partner and see if they will carry you through as a fiscal sponsor. And you can still come into the process via their assistance while you're waiting on the 501c3 tax-exempt official status notification. The other thing you should know is that moving into 2020, NAAF as an organization and our board of trustees has been very vocal with me about this. We're going to do some kind of on-the-ground assistance to community organizations to really help them stand up their 501c3 status and really help them build their capacity to be strong 501c3s working in the food and agriculture space. The second eligible entity type is educational organizations, and those are outlined in the Internal Revenue Code as well. And that section that's identified there on the slide is the section of the Internal Revenue Code that identifies the type of educational organization that is eligible. And so it's a pretty long list. Most educational organizations know what they are. And so just take a look if you happen to be a provider of education and take a look at that section. It's pretty easy to Google it and just make sure that you fit one of those categories identified there. The third area of eligible entities is community development financial institutions. And these can include certified native CDFIs and emerging native CDFIs. Provided, however, that such CDFI is a tax-exempt organization described in Section 501c3. Again, you should know that when we actually lift up sections out of the trust agreement, we are lifting it verbatim. So it's really important that every eligible entity or entity that thinks it's eligible take a really strong look at this eligibility, these four types, so that they can choose their avenue carefully and make sure that they comply. The fourth is an instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe, including a nonprofit organization chartered under tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe that furnishes assistance designed to further native farming and ranching. It's really important, though, that tribal governments, state or federally recognized tribal governments and their instrumentalities take a look at this section. The use of any grant funds by those entities is restricted exclusively to charitable and educational purposes. The grant recipient in this category has to provide NAAF with audited financial statements and reports as required by NAAF. And if the recipient is a governmental entity, it's required to provide us a limited waiver of sovereign immunity with respect to our NAAF's right to enforce the terms of the grant agreement itself. And that limited waiver is going to be limited to the amount of funding awarded. And then the grant recipient must also agree to comply with the expenditure responsibilities that are outlined in the trust agreement. So if you are with a state or federally recognized tribe or an instrumentality of one of those sorts of tribes, then take a look at that section and read it very closely. Again, I said earlier, grants to fiscal sponsors are allowable. Fiscal sponsors can be organizations that have 501c3 determination already and just agree to work with an organization that hasn't achieved that status yet. Verification of your eligibility as an entity is required. The applicants that submit their applications are required to provide documentation that you are eligible. And just know, because we get this question quite a bit as to what the interpretation is of native farmers and ranchers, but the trustees have been very clear to us that it should be interpreted in the broadest context possible, and it's meant to include farmers of all types of food and agriculture products and ranchers of all types of livestock. And in the FastTrack Funding awardees, there were fishers and tribes that have fishers that that are, and fisheries that are involved there. And so that the term farmer and rancher is meant to be a broad context. Applicants receiving funds will be required to use the funds to provide services to Native farmers and ranchers, including those seeking to become farmers and ranchers, and to support and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. Just a little side note, all across the country and quite frankly, beyond our borders, there is an intergenerational shift occurring in all agriculture around the globe. And it's so important that the younger ones among us have that leg up and ability to step into the roles that elders and people of my age and middle age who've been at the farming and ranching and fishing for a while are currently involved in. And it's so, I see it all the time, folks who are bringing other younger people along. And the trustees and our team recognize the importance of making sure that not only do we meet the service needs of existing Native farmers and ranchers, but that we also look down the road a bit. Again, the key areas that are allowed for funding under the trust agreement are broadly described as business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. So when you're thinking about what you want your project to be involved in, drive into those spaces, if you will. Those are key components of what the trust agreement has allowed the NAAF organization to fund in terms of its key areas for funding. Again, the trust agreement controls the eligible uses and eligible entities for NAAF grant-making purposes. It prohibits, in a very specific section, grant funding for individual farmers and ranchers. What that means is NAAF itself cannot provide an individual grant to an individual Native farmer or rancher. But the trust can make grants to eligible organizations, eligible entities, eligible recipients that then in turn make grants to those individuals. And the same applies for our lending issues. If you remember, CDFIs are identified as one of the eligible entities that we can make a grant to CDFIs who can then in turn make loans to Native farmers and ranchers. So, but the trust agreement prohibits us from actually doing it directly. We have to work through these four types of eligible entities. NAAF has decided that the funds for projects that you propose can be for a period of up to 24 months or 2 years in duration. They can be used for project support, for scholarships, for re-grants, for loans, or for capital expenditures. You just got to be specific about how they drive into those four areas: agricultural education, technical support, business assistance, or advocacy. Funding for programs that strictly meet the emphasis areas for this 2019 RFA will be given the highest priority for funding in this application process. But as I shared with you right at the beginning, this is going to be an annual process moving forward, and the focus may change depending on the needs of Native farmers and ranchers. So just be aware that you're going to need to repeat this process when the next RFA comes out. So non-eligible entities or projects include, and these are things that we're not looking to actually fund. Entities that don't provide business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, or advocacy services to Native farmers and ranchers. Work based outside the U.S. Projects that don't provide assistance designed to further the success of Native farming and ranching or provide resources designed to further such success. Projects that seek funding predominantly to provide outreach on USDA programs and services. USDA has funds that it uses to provide those outreach on programs and services, and we just don't believe that our job is to do USDA's job. And so we are not seeking to fund predominantly outreach on USDA programs. Projects that assist individual natives and farmers farmers and ranchers, but the services are not agriculture related. There's a lot of folks who try to help native farmers and ranchers, but they're not really trying to help them on agriculture related activities. The folks just happen to be native farmers and ranchers. So we are trying to drive into the space of agricultural related projects. We've also got to insist, because the trust agreement is very clear about this, that the funds have to be used for charitable and educational purposes, and that we are not interested at this point in doing direct financial assistance to native farmers and ranchers who are addressing natural disasters. Those funds, again, are provided by USDA. They have probably fairly comprehensive at this point, and likely they're going to continue to be focused on doing natural disaster mitigation and crop insurance. But at this moment in time, we are just not in a place where we're going to be providing funds for direct financial assistance to native farmers and ranchers who are addressing natural disasters. If you actually look on our website, we still have up, I think, some guidances that we've received, not only from NCAI, but from Farm Aid and from USDA itself, about natural disaster resources that are out there. And if you've ever got any questions about those, we're happy to direct you to those resources. We also cannot use funds for litigation. That is actually specifically in the trust agreement itself. We cannot use those NAAF funds for litigation. But I will tell you, and most of you who are on this call know that I'm an agricultural lawyer. There's a lot of things that native farmers and ranchers, or any farmers and ranchers, need that fall into the category of legal services that is not litigation. So we're not opposed to, nor are we prohibited from actually providing resources for those kinds of entities, so long as you're eligible entity who do non-litigation legal services. We also cannot fund, and it's in the trust agreement again, that we cannot use the funds for direct lobbying or political activity as defined by the IRS. Many of you who already are 501c3s know that that's a tricky area, but it's really important to understand too that there's lots of other forms of advocacy, and other forms of advocacy could be allowable. We're just going to leave it to you to be creative in that regard. Also, please know that if you're an educational organization but you don't have an established record of working with, by, or through native farmers and ranchers, we don't consider you to be eligible for funding unless you partner with a native-controlled educational organization, and such native-controlled educational organization is the lead applicant on the project. We're very much focused on making sure that native-led organizations and native-controlled educational organizations are in the lead on these projects, not only so that we can bring their own portfolio to the fore, but to make sure that folks who are purporting to work with native farmers and ranchers know their audience, and native-controlled educational organizations do. So please pay attention to that particular piece. We've gotten several questions around the FastTrack funded groups, that there were 34 of those who received FastTrack funding. They would be eligible under this request for applications, but they got to actually not seek funding for a project that their FastTrack funding is already funding. So it has to be new work or continuation of work that was started under the FastTrack but is entering a new phase. So it has to have that new component to it. We're also not, this last point on this particular slide, I've already mentioned, if you're a part of a community-based organization and you don't squarely meet the definition of eligible entities in the RFA, most likely you're trying to or thinking about becoming a 501c3. Don't despair. Just go out and see about finding a 501c3 or another eligible type of entity through which to do your work and partner with them. Funding for programs that strictly meet the emphasis areas for this request for applications will be given the highest priority during this application process period. And I'm getting into those in just a few seconds. But if you really think back to the central issues that were involved for so many years, over 19 years in the Keep Siegel litigation, they involved issues that were at the core of access to credit. So understand that when you're actually applying for funds for this go around, we will give additional consideration to those types of projects that have as one of their specific targeted outcomes the improvement of access to credit for and by Native farmers and ranchers. We very much are concerned that, and we will continue to drive to the heart of this particular case that led to the creation of the fund. And the core issues were access to credit. So that's very, very important to us. It's also important to think about when you're putting your application together, think about being creative about combining areas, like combining business assistance with technical support, or combining business assistance with agricultural education. So anytime that we see applications that try to combine those kind of focus areas that we're required to work within, those will be given additional consideration. The other issue that you should think about, there is language in the request for applications that talks about the importance of value-added agriculture. For those of you who are and have been involved in food and agriculture for quite some time, you also know how important value-added agriculture can be when actually thinking about stabilizing an agricultural production system or stabilizing an agricultural economy at the local or tribal level. And so just understand that we are looking for those always, and there are some very specific business assistance pieces and educational pieces that attach to actually pulling off successful value-added agriculture projects. We will fund education and advocacy projects that ensure solid educational information is provided to those who are developing policies in the advocacy arena, and to Native farmers and ranchers education as to those policies. So just be aware of that as well. And we really also are very focused too on seeking to provide educational opportunities or training programs for Native students that are not directly involved in or focused on the agricultural sciences. We are not going to fund those at this go around because the need for an agricultural bench in Indian country is so profound. So we're not opposed to agricultural, we're not opposed to education. That is not what we're saying. What we're trying to do is drive into the heart of agricultural sciences education and educational opportunities for those Native students, no matter what their age, who are willing and passionate about creating the next bench for Indian country in food and agriculture arenas. So we've determined that there will be 4 primary priority areas and an additional 4 special emphasis areas for which funding will be provided during this 2019 funding cycle. Okay, the first of those is CDFIs. Funding applications are being sought from CDFIs or Native CDFIs, and it's really important that you do meet the definition for those eligible entities, and that we would like for you to currently be providing educational lending to Native farming and ranching. However, you could be responding to a growing need in your area, in your service area around agricultural lending. These entities are not required to provide any specific percentage of their pool of lending to Native farmers and ranchers, but they should have demonstrated activity in this lending area when they put together their applications. There's a pool of $2 million that will be made available to fund projects proposed by those eligible entities. We need for you in your narrative to talk about the level of current agricultural lending portfolio you have, or a demonstrated need through public input from your service area for lending opportunities needed by Native farmers and ranchers in the area you serve. There's no set limit on the amount of total available funding for any one project. So we will give additional consideration to those applicants who can seek to serve the broadest number of potential Native farmers and ranchers within the scope of their requests. Moving on to educational organizations, we're also seeking funding from educational institutions or organizations meeting the definition that's back in the previous slides. And we're looking for advanced agricultural business classroom training, or it could be online training as well, who are ready to provide, or from those educational institutions that are ready to provide advanced agricultural business classroom training. Again, because a lot of classrooms are not a lot, but many classrooms are moving into the online capacity. We will entertain both online as well as in person. The training should be made available to Native students of the institution. It can be through a certificate program, a degree-seeking program. We don't have a preference particularly. We just are encouraging educational entities to actually consider the bench that they need to try to give life to where they are. It can cover a broad area of topics: agricultural economics, financing, marketing, some of the technical issues around supply chain, agricultural business entity selection, risk management, food safety, agricultural law and policy, supply chain, transportation, logistics, and really any related advanced agricultural business area. It can be used to provide targeted training to Native farmers and ranchers in these particular areas. Again, I think most folks who are in the educational world are used to being very creative with their curriculum and with their coursework and with what they try to put together to offer to their students, no matter the age of the student, no matter where they're located. So we will leave it to you all to actually put your creative juices to working on those particular kind of concept areas of topics you want to cover. The other thing we wanted you to think about is if your project includes a FERTAP faculty member. For those of you who are in the educational arena around agriculture in Indian country, you're going to know what a FERTAP person is. FERTAPs is a very specific source of federal funding that was set up many years ago, several decades ago, to fund federally recognized tribes extension programs. There's a whole history behind that program. It continues to be the focus whenever farm bills come up. But what we wanted to make sure was if your project comes out of an institution that has a FERTAP faculty member, that faculty member must be in the lead on the application, and the funds of the project are to be used not for their salary expenses, but for program assistance, because it's been a chronic problem within the FERTAP program that the funding at that level usually only covers the salary, and so the faculty are sitting around with no project expenses. So we're trying to be very strategic and deliberate in that particular one. But you do not have to be an educational organization that has a FERTAP faculty member. You can be another educational organization with different funded faculties. So you'll know who you are if you are an institution that has FERTAP folks involved. So just be aware that there's a specific twist on those particular types of applications because of that unique and important status. Funding will not be provided to propose projects in this category if the folks who are being served in the classroom or online or through the certificate program are not majority Native farmers and ranchers. NAAF funds need to be focused on building our professional bench and training up native farmers and ranchers. While we have no problem if other folks want to benefit by the things that we fund and set in motion, our focus is on building up native farmers and ranchers. The last component of this slide talks about the funding level that we have set aside for that. And again, there's no upper or lower limit on the amount of funds requested, but there are overhead limitations, and we'll get to those in a bit when we talk about budget. Priority area, funding area, a 501c3. You can probably see the trend we're talking about here. We have set aside funds for each of the types of eligible entities, and then in a few minutes I'm going to get into the special emphasis areas as well. Funding applications are also sought from nonprofit organizations meeting that eligible entity definition, which is 501c3, or working through a fiscal agent who is a 501c3. The nonprofit organization must provide proof that they are currently serving native farmers and ranchers. And if you actually walk yourself through the application process on the software system, it'll ask you in a drop-down menu to actually reflect upon the percentage of your portfolio of activities that are focused solely on the needs of native farmers and ranchers. So you'll be able to click on in your application the picture that looks the most like what you're doing. Nonprofit organizations can seek funding for enhancement of their own knowledge in food and agriculture sector to encourage their employees and staff to have a deeper understanding of agriculture and food and the needs of native farmers and ranchers. But internal capacity development, while we acknowledge and know that that is really, really important, it can't be the majority of your proposed activities. You've got to serve the people. You've got to serve the native farmers and ranchers whose success is the purpose of this NAAF and this funding. So we recognize that there's a need for all nonprofit organizations serving native farmers and ranchers who are driving towards success and stability and sustainability to have greater knowledge. We just need for your application to not look totally within yourselves, but to think about how you're going to serve those who aren't a part of your team. There's an available pool of $2 million for the projects in that category. No particular limit on the amount of funding that you can seek. We are going to give higher consideration to those organizations that have a singular focus on native farmers and ranchers as their primary stakeholder group. There are organizations out there that have multiple types of stakeholders, but we will give higher consideration to those that are singular and focus on native farmers and ranchers. We also are going to be looking for folks that have experience, but again, as I've said, we're fine for you to put forward a project that talks about internal capacity building, because that is important. But we also are going to be looking for your established history of working with native farmers and ranchers. If you're a startup or nonprofit organization, we need for your fiscal sponsor to have some kind of proof of their service to Indian country and or the native farming and ranching community. That's really important, as you all know, and we are going to be looking for that as well. For the priority funding area for tribes, go back, and if you are coming at this from the standpoint of a tribal government entity or an instrumentality of a tribal government, federally or state recognized tribal government, we are seeking from those eligible entities, but go back and think about how you present yourself in that context. What we're looking for from tribes, and we're actually responding to what are a lot of things that are happening out there. We are going to be looking from tribes for applications really driving into the space of value-added agricultural enterprise development. We're going to be looking to fund feasibility studies, the securing of technical advisors for feasibility studies or for planning for future value-added agricultural enterprises and for projects that are close to being shovel ready or are shovel ready. Tribes need to be prepared to move to the next step towards investing in creating value-added infrastructure that Native farmers and ranchers need in order to secure or maintain access to current or future markets, or expand their products available for markets, or obtain specialized technical support necessary in order to access or maintain presence in markets. So we all recognize the role of tribal government organizations and entities as so important in terms of being able to really create some momentum around value-added infrastructure development, but also the capacity and skills development that sits around being ready for value-added market development. The reason why, and we've actually put it in the RFA itself and some of the explanatory language in this particular area, we just see it, when I say we, I mean the trustees as a function of their strategic planning, but also the staff here and myself really see value-added agriculture as having unlimited possibilities for growth for Native farmers and ranchers and tribal economic development activities. So this feasibility study component is really important because it really can, in many cases, determine the success or failure of a project that you, as tribal governments, may be embarking on or investing in. So we are setting aside a pool of funds for projects in this particular area. It is targeted, and the project budget should be at or close to the $75,000 in total budget funding sought. Some project feasibility studies require more resources than that, but we felt it was a good investment for NAAF to come at value-added infrastructure development planning with a respectable amount of funds available for those kinds of activities. But we will entertain higher amounts, but those entities need to be very specific if they wish to be considered for higher amounts of funding in that area. Okay, I'm going to switch very, very quickly now to special emphasis funding. Those previous four areas were really focused on targeted funding for the four types of entities that we can fund through the language of the trust agreement. Now I'm going to be looking at special emphasis funding, and for here we are looking at four key special emphasis areas. These have been determined by NAAF and the trustees as important and of high interest among survey respondents. So please respond to the survey because we are getting this kind of input from folks every week. And these are some of the areas that are either sparking a lot of interest right now, but are kind of foundational concerns important to the underpinning of a sustainable food system throughout Indian country. These four areas for special emphasis funding are traditional foods and food sovereignty programs, hemp production analysis, youth programming, and the agricultural sciences. Again, we're going to be limiting the amount of the overall project budget that we'll fund in this particular area, and we will set aside and have set aside funding for $500,000 in each one of these areas to focus in on projects that kind of speak to these special emphasis areas. So in traditional foods and food sovereignty, we're really looking for folks who are trying to establish a new focus area for their existing food sovereignty and traditional foods programming. This might be folks who have been doing food sovereignty and traditional foods work, but are looking to scale up and maybe make their community agriculture bigger, or kind of move it to the next level, or move it to a different component, increase acreages, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever you defined as scaling up, it's beyond just getting started. So we're looking at secondary and follow-up activities to implement also any existing food sovereignty assessment processes. For those of you who are early in the food sovereignty assessment journey, you should be looking Two, to completing your first phase and then thinking about what's happening next. So secondary or follow-up activities would fall into this category. These are just some of the ideas that we threw out to you. I know you're creative, you're going to come up with your own ideas, but this is a component set aside for food sovereignty and traditional foods work. In the hemp production analysis, we're going to be narrowly focused on some issues to explore the potential of industrial hemp production and value-added activities around industrial hemp production among tribal communities. So everyone knows it's almost impossible to go to any Indian country meeting without somebody talking about hemp. And we also know that it's important as a new and emerging national production system, and that Indian country has a role in that production system. But it's just a very complex area, a myriad of business, regulatory, and production issues. And if you don't kind of step back and analyze those, then you could walk into some problems as you try to get your hemp production system up and going. For the tribes that are going down this path, they're probably nodding their heads right now. And yes, it is much more complicated than people talk about. So we are looking for to fund a group of projects focused on partial funding for project feasibility and market analysis studies for emerging industrial hemp crop production, or partial project feasibility and market analysis for emerging value-added hemp production or manufacturing businesses. We're looking to fund projects that might look at transportation, testing, self-regulation, and tribal governments' roles in regulating the needs of an emerging hemp production system, or development of tribal plans that are authorized under the 2018 Farm Bill that decriminalize basically hemp production. Again, all to support tribal self-governance around these issues, but also our investment across Indian country in this emerging production and market system. We will fund between the $50,000 and $75,000 project level with a total of $500,000 in funding in this particular area. But please note, we won't entertain funding for CBD related production or analysis. And the reason why is that there is just a whole set of emerging medical and labeling regulatory issues that are going to be facing the CBD arena. These are extremely complex, and the regulating environment at this point in time is developing. It's premature and really pretty uncertain. And we actually, in our own research have realized that industrial hemp production systems and value-added industrial products has a much more variety and much more capacity for growth. Youth programming. I mentioned earlier about the intergenerational shift. That is among us, as we know. We all probably on this phone have youth components to our work already. I know I have over the years. But the trustees and our leadership here at NAAF believe the presence of Native youth in ag is really important to the continued growth of our food systems. And so we really are looking to support kind of hands-on food production, support for 4-H FFA or other youth groups, youth-led community projects, youth food councils, travel scholarships, so that Native youth can participate in agriculture leadership programs. I mean, the list, those are just a few of the ideas. It's really kind of up to you to be creative about what your youth-focused work is going to, what your project is going to look like. So, but we really are interested in making sure that the heart of those projects is to make sure we share with Native youth who are interested in choosing food and agriculture, farming, ranching, or food system businesses, just as much information as they can so that they can make good, choices about what to do with their lives, but so that we can actually continue to build out our bench. Now, we would love it to fund as many projects as we can in this particular area. A lot of smaller project work at the specific tribal level, 25,000 is probably adequate, but if you send us something that's more at the top end of that range, we will entertain it. But just know that we would love to fund as many of these projects in this area as possible. The agricultural sciences, we're also interested in providing funding through scholarships to attend existing agricultural science programs. Regardless of the type of degree awarding institution, we don't have a preference there. We just know that we got to get folks in the pipeline in food and in agriculture. And they can be in the sciences, the hard sciences, but they can also be in the traditional ecological sciences, but they also can be in the technical sciences around economics and business, and law and policy for that matter. But focusing on the bench is just really important. It's important to all of us, I think. So just be thinking about whether your project wants to look at broad scholarship programs for individual students, or whether you're going to do this from a single or multiple institution recruitment and engagement kind of focus. It's really get creative. We encourage you to do that. But we have a special emphasis area around agricultural sciences. So we also are looking and want folks to think about how do we get students who have come out of a tribal college, have gone on to finish their undergrad somewhere, or have come out of a tribal college that awards undergrad degrees, but how do we get them into graduate programs and beyond? So those things are important as well as some of the national needs areas such as veterinary programs or pre-veterinary programs. So just it's agriculture and food jobs cover a wide range. And so just being aware that NAAF, the trustees, as well as our staff, believe in the power of continued education and opportunities for folks, regardless of their age, to be involved in food and agriculture. We know it's important. So just think about how you would approach your application in this area. We've set aside $500,000 for funding in this area, and there is no particular upper budget request limit to any individual application we receive. So there's some kind of general points I want you to think about too when you're thinking about your application. Think about the scope and nature of the services that you've previously provided to Native farmers and ranchers, what you have come to understand about their needs. Then think about too the scope and nature of the services you plan to provide to them moving forward if you're awarded funds from this request for application process. We need for you to think, if you have an existing organization, how does your requested award amount fit within the overall budget for your organization? And how does your work integrate community accountability and Native leadership? Those are all very important things to think about as you're conceptualizing your project, and they are important to us as well. So when you put together your narrative, be sure to hit those components. And if you use the online system, then you will see that we ask you some questions kind of in these areas. I do want to make a note too that we will accept hard copy typewritten applications. And if you actually look on our website, we have all of the questions that are in the online system are there as a PDF document. You can click on that, download it, copy it off on your printer, and just send us an application in hard copy as well. So we're happy to receive them in that way as well. Other points to consider in your applications is how are you going to make sure that the funds will be used for the purposes that you've stated in your proposal. We realize things change, but if you are a funded project this go around, we want you to establish a relationship with us so that we can be apprised of when things change, because they do, and just keep us informed. But think about it. I think it's important to think about it walking into a project as you begin to think about putting it together. We need you to think about whether your organization is based in a Native community that you're serving, or whether you are in service to them, but your organization is not based there. We need for you to think about, whether your organization is Native-led or not. You will see questions in the application that actually speak to those issues. So don't be surprised when you actually start to fill out your application that you are prompted to give us some information about that. We also want you to think about your leaders and board members and who they represent in your community and their accountability to the community that you're going to be serving. So that's also equally important. When we look at all the applications when they come in, which we will start doing October 1, application period closes September 30, and we are anxiously awaiting October 1 so that we can start delving in. But look at these criteria for review. They're very specifically laid out in the request for applications with a lot more kind of definition and explanation surrounding them. But these are the 7 areas: what your proposed results are, what the farmer and rancher demand is in your area for your particular project, what your organizational capacity is and whether you have collaborators or cooperators, and what their capacity is. Are you going to drive to the heart of making an impact on access to credit? That's always important because it is the core issue that was involved in the case itself. We want you to think about results and being clear in your narrative about the results you hope to achieve. We'd love for you to talk about innovation and what you're doing in your particular project that might be new or innovative, but it doesn't have to be. We just want you to think about that. And then wide application and replicability. Many times projects are funded in various locations around Indian country, and we only think that they are conducive to the work within that community. And sometimes those projects, what we learn and what we put together to work with the Native farmers and ranchers in our own tribes is replicable and useful to other tribes. So we want you to think about and talk about that when you actually are putting together your narrative. And we'll be looking for those kinds of components, those 7 components, when the applications are reviewed for possible funding. There are some mandatory documents. Those are listed on the website. They're listed in the request for applications. They're listed in the PDF document that walks through all of the questions that are in the online system. So they're listed. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email us or call us and ask us, is this required? Because we'll go over it with you. If you're tax exempt, you will have gotten a letter at some point in time. Just be prepared to lay your hands on that letter and get it uploaded. If you are a tribal government and you are required, if you remember, tribal government entities have to be willing to give us that limited waiver of sovereign immunity. Some tribes require a formal resolution to be passed before an application for funding can even be put forward. We will not presume to know every single tribe's requirements, how they want their letters to look, how they want their resolutions to look. That's an impossible task as far as we're concerned. So we need for you to be specific with regard to what your tribal government requires in terms of copies of resolutions and what the terminology of those might be. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll work with you to figure out exactly what could be necessary in those resolutions. But at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a description of what you're proposing to do and a statement of the authority or approval of the applicant to apply for the funding and signed by an appropriate official. But how you move that through your governmental system is up to you. Should you receive an award, it's got to be used for the purposes of the project as it was funded. And it's got to be used to provide assistance designed to further Native American farming and ranching and for the purposes set forth in your application and for charitable and educational purposes under the Internal Revenue Code. These are all requirements that are a part of the trust agreement. So should you receive an award, we're going to end up being in a relationship with you through an award agreement, and those steps will come later, and everyone will sign off on those should you decide to accept any award that it's determined that would be awarded to your organization. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but it is important for us to let you know that kind of at the outset that we have to, the trust agreement is very specific about how the funds can be used for future projects funded by NAAF. So I'm going to turn this over and take a breather and let Marie, I believe, walk us through some of the other forms, and then Marie is also going to walk us through some of the screenshots of the actual online application system that we're using. And so I'm going to turn it over to other folks on my staff, and we will come back for some questions, but I think let's walk through these final slides right quick around the budget and the actual application so we can get that done, and then we'll come back and deal with any questions. So stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Marie Wakan, and I will be walking you through the online application process.
So let's go back just for a minute, Marie. I think we're going to hear from you in just a minute, but I want to walk through some budget issues first. Let's do that first. So for those of you who are applying for any combination of either targeted or special emphasis, there are some required formats for the project budget. The required formats for the project budget are available already on our website as downloads. And you can actually go to that, the Native American Agriculture Fund.org/grants, and you'll see budget guidelines, budget template, project budget sample, and a budget narrative sample. So when you're doing your application, a lot of folks spend a whole lot of time with their project design and their narrative and making sure that they kind of hit all those marks and think creatively, and then they kind of get stalled out on the budget. But please don't do that. Please don't wait till the last minute to think about your budget or reading through the budget guidelines. Just go ahead, and my advice to you is go ahead and download those and read through them now as you're reading through the request for applications itself. We ask you to please use the required format for the project budget. We have provided you with those formats and the guidelines discussing how to use them. Again, don't hesitate to call us if you've got a question on one of those forms or how we've described it, and someone on our staff will walk you through any questions you might have. The other thing I'll share with you all too is, Emery, I'm going to walk through the rest of the budget stuff before I turn it over to you again. But the other piece of this puzzle that I really wanted to make sure that I talked about before now, but I'm bringing it up, is we have frequently asked questions that are already on the website. You all need to know that when we get through with this webinar, we're going to comb through all the questions that we get. And if they are brand new and should be added to the frequently asked questions, we're going to do that. We're going to do that after each one of the webinars. And if we get, some new question that nobody ever thought about and we get it through our email system or in a telephone call, we're going to use that and upload and change the frequently asked questions as we move through the end of all through August and all through September. We want you to have, as quickly as we can, pull it together and get it on the website, new and updated frequently asked questions. So don't hesitate to go back to those frequently asked questions. We will date them so that you'll know that you got the most recent example of the frequently asked questions. And I can assure you there will be questions that nobody else has thought of that still come in. So we'll do our best throughout this process to be as responsive and get those answers back out to everyone. We're not going to help you do your project though. So what we are looking for are kind of commonality questions. So include at the top of your budget forms your organization name, your project name, and the requested grant period in months. You're going to use separate columns. You don't have to do a 2-year project. What we have found over time, 30 years of time, is that it's sometimes hard to get a 1-year project up and running in 1 year. So think creatively. We're looking for up to 2 years. We're fine with a 1 year, but really think strategically about how long it's really going to take you to kind of get up and running. Identify in your project budget narrative the specific project activities that relate to your work. And when you start to actually fill out the budget form and then talk about it in the narrative, that'll be clear to you as you move through the process. We really need you to kind of think clearly about how your budget items kind of track back into the project work itself. This is just a practical tip that I'm going to have help when I have to do it because wrapping text is not my forte. So if you need help, call us for sure. But remember to wrap the text so that all of your explanation is in a single cell and shows up and it's not accidentally cut off when you try to save or transfer the document itself. It's just kind of an important step that we all should learn, including me. Check the math in your Excel document. Make sure all your numbers are in a column are visible and not cut off due to formatting. This is like one of those last minute checks you want to make sure so that something doesn't disappear in your submittal process. And if your budget runs onto more than one page, include the column headings on your second page just to make sure that there's not assumption that it has to be done at this end. And so we don't really anticipate most folks are going to go beyond 1 or 2 pages in a budget or a budget narrative. You might get lengthy. We're not going to, there is a limit on characters, but we're not going to penalize you if you decide to go on and on about your budget narrative. Sometimes these things, more information is better. On budget categories, think about your personnel who's going to be involved, their title, their annual salary, and the percentage of time you think they're going to use NAAF funding to actually work within as a total of their salary year, for instance. On direct costs, meetings and travel, indicate the number of meetings or trips you're going to take. We're asking everyone, and it's in the RFA, to set aside some money out of their budget to come to an annual grantee meeting. If you are a successful grantee, you'll be advised of that, but we need you to go ahead and everyone go ahead and include travel costs for at least one person on your team to come to a grantee meeting should you be selected for funding. This slide really talks a little bit about just trying to get you to be specific about supplies. If you're going to use consultants, indicate the number of hours and the hourly rate ranges or stipend or honoraria that you're going to be using to work with them in NAAF supported work. Printing and publications, just be specific there about the number and types of materials you're thinking that you might need to actually support your work. And I think I've already covered meetings and travel issues. If you're going to be doing regranting loans or scholarships, just be specific about it concerning the costs associated with that work. And then on indirect costs, it's in the request for applications, but we are very focused on really determining the proper level of indirect costs. There's actually a reference to indirect costs, administrative costs in the actual trust agreement itself, and that they should be reasonable. But for this request for applications in 2019, we're imposing a 15% allowable indirect administrative costs as a part of your budget. So just understand, if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to contact us. We have several staff members who are well versed in how this works. But some indirect costs can be quite hefty, and some folks don't include enough. I'm not sure, there's a wide range of what is quote unquote reasonable, but for this particular application, we're looking at a 15% limitation. So it is now yours. Marie.
Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Marie Walkon. I will be walking you through the application process. So how to apply online. This presentation will teach you how to apply for the Native American Agricultural Fund, NAAF, 2019 request for applications. All applicants will be directed to NAAF's grant page, where they can review important documents and click the Start Application yellow button, which will take them to the application page. Next. First, you will go to the NAAF page and start your application. The link to the logon page for the Native American Agricultural Fund, NAAF's application, is found on the grants page of the Native American Agricultural main website. In order to access the online application system to apply, you must register on the system by clicking the Create New Account button on the logon page. There are a few notes that we would like to bring to your attention. First, the applicants are the only users that complete the registration process. Please note, duplicate applicants from the same organizations will be flagged. And lastly, the email you use when creating an account will become your username. Next. Creating a new account is a multi-step process. The first section collects the organization's information. Once all required fields are entered, selecting Next will bring you to the next section. Then you will complete the user information section, meant to capture the applicant's information or the information of the person completing the registration process that will be submitting a request. If the applicant's mailing address is the same, you can copy it by pressing the Copy Address from Organization button. Next. The email address entered in the email username field becomes your user. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Sorry about that. Marie, we got you back. Carry on.
Okay. All right. Where did you hear me last?
You were beginning this particular slide on new account continued.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start from the very top of the page. Okay, so the email address entered and the email username field becomes your username in the system. For this reason, an email address may only be registered once into the system, as this is your unique identifier. After you fill out the first section, you will be asked to continue to fill out executive officer information as well as organization information. First, you must indicate if you are the organization's executive officer or enter on behalf of the executive officer. Some applicants will enter as an executive officer and the main point of contact. Therefore, these staff members should not use their own email. Instead, they should use the email of the person who will access the site and become the main point of contact. Next. Once you have completed all of the sections, you will see a button on the bottom right of the page. Click on the button and it will ask you to confirm your email. Next. Upon clicking Create Account, an automatic email will be sent to you. Directed to the email you will enter in your information email login field. This automatic email is a system Okay. You will land on the confirmation page where you are asked to confirm that you receive an automatic confirmation email. The email can be resent if necessary to ensure system emails are being received. If you have any issues with your email, you can email grants, Native American Agricultural Fund, agriculturalfund.org, and we will work to resolve your login issues. Next. Once you have created your account, you can enter through the login page once you have logged on, and you will see the following page. There is that application button on the right where the arrow is pointing. You want to click on that after you get to this page. Next. Once you start your application, you will have a series of questions and fill in the blank sections as well as uploaded document questions. Depending on what type of funding and how many projects you are applying for, you will have access to all or some of the questions. If you check the box No on a section, you will not see the questions associated with that area of funding. For example, if you apply for targeted funding only, you will not see the questions for any special emphasis area of funding. Applications automatically saved. Next. Uploading the documents. You can only upload PDF documents. You will be asked to save project templates, budget templates for each project or area of funding you are applying for. These links can be found within the application. Click them, download them, fill them out, and then upload them back into the application in PDF form. Next. Once you have completed the application and push the submit button, you will be taken back to the dashboard. In the future, this is where you will see your application status updates and finally your approval or denial status. Approval letters will be mailed out with further instructions and the final amount of each award to successful applicants. Next. Here are some critical dates that we would like. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Here are some critical dates that we would like to share with you. August 1st, 2019 is the request for open for request for applications. The close date is September 30th, 2019 at 11:59 Central Standard Time. Next.
So Marie, I'm going to take back over and then we're going to move into questions. So thank you, Marie, very much. If anyone has any questions when they actually go into the system, then they need to just don't hesitate to put us on speed dial and reach out. We'd be happy to provide technical support. That's why we're here. So be sure to write down or tab these the website pages, our main web page, where you can access all the essential documents that we talked about today. www.nativeamericanagriculturefund.org, /grants. And then the email is grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. The phone number is 479-445-6226. Our phone line is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 p.m. Central, and you can leave a message at other times. Our staff are committed to getting back to you within 24 to 48 hours, and we have an elaborate mechanism to do that. And so we're already doing that, and we will continue to be very responsive to you. So just don't hesitate to give us a call. Obviously, the online application portal is preferred, but if you feel that you need to do a paper application, just be sure and make that decision early. Paper applications must meet all the requirements specified within the application, so be sure and download all the documents, read through, make sure you've got the mandatory attachments with you, and just make sure that you impose on yourself the character limits that are within each category, because we can't let paper applicants have a leg up on the character limits that we've imposed on the online applicants. Please don't submit both, just choose either online or paper application, but as I've said, we're happy to receive them in paper. They've got to be submitted and post-dated or date stamped, whichever kind of service you use. If it's the U.S. Postal Service or it's some other carrier, just make sure it is submitted and dated by September 30, 2019 at that last final hour. So don't wait till the last minute. The address is there, 534 West Research Center Boulevard, Suite 220. That's NAAF's address, Post Office Box 1427, Fayetteville, Arkansas, 72701. And the future webinars, we have another one, August 20th, again from 2 to 4 p.m., same time. And you can register for that. And then we have another one September 3rd, that's it for now. And so I'm just going to leave those future webinar dates up on the screen. And Carly, let's start walking through the questions that we received. And I'll do my best to answer them. And if we need to do more research and get back to you, then we will do that. And we'll post them to our frequently asked questions as an amendment, and all of those other components that we talked about. So let's start plowing through it.
Excellent. Our first question is, are grants recipients allowed to make grants? Can we make grants to tribal members for supporting their agriculture products?
Yeah, if you remember one of the slides, several slides back, I talked about you could do re-granting and you could do lending. So it is up to the organization about how they want to structure their own application, but that is a possibility. If you remember, the reason why this is important is that NAAF as the fund cannot do direct granting to individuals nor direct loans to individuals. So in order to actually get resources to individuals, we have to use an eligible entity to do that. So that is really up to the eligible entity about how they want to put together their application, but re-granting and re-lending is acceptable. We just cannot do it directly from the fund.
Next question. We are a certified CDFI, but we don't have 501c3 status. We are a tribal nonprofit incorporated under our tribal nations laws. Is that okay?
It should be okay, but you've got to provide proof to us of your incorporation under your tribe's nonprofit statutes. Again, one of the reasons why we were not as prescriptive in this particular area and why we give signals to entities that it's up to them to provide us the evidence of their meeting one of those 4 eligible types is that there is no central registry and there's no way for NAAF to know how each entity that does this kind of work is organized. So it's really up to you to drive yourself through your documents that you submit with your application into one of these eligible spaces. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, then just call or email us and we'll provide further clarification in the FAQs that we update from time to time. But it is possible, but you've got to drive to that solution. I hope that makes sense.
Can you elaborate on the difference between an instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe and a government entity?
I would love to be able to, but the trust agreement provided us no guidance. It did not define the term instrumentality or a sub-government entity. So I need for the applicants themselves to put forward their take on what an instrumentality might be, or a governmental entity of a tribe. The way I have always thought about it is maybe this is an agricultural department of a tribe, or maybe it is a separate food authority of a tribe, or a separate agricultural authority, or maybe it's a tribal farm. Again, there's no way for us to predict how tribes array themselves, so we really need for you to provide as much explanation as possible about why you fit within those legal entities. But the trust agreement itself provided us it basically said instrumentality. It provided us no prescriptive definition that would guide us in that regard.
In order to be able to apply for funding, do you have to be an entity that intends to be a nonprofit? Can you be a for-profit business with a fiscal sponsor?
Your fiscal sponsor must meet one of the 4 eligible entity criteria. And you've got to otherwise meet the requirements of the request for application.
Are you all going to be doing outreach at upcoming conferences?
Yes. We are open for business, and we're happy to go wherever we can stretch ourselves to go. And I'm not sure who actually, I bet I can guess who actually asked me that. But yeah, I'm like, for instance, I'm going to be on one of the panels at the tourism conference that's coming up. So we get requests to come out and speak all the time on various panels. So we're happy to do that. And during this application period, we are out there and we'll be talking about the application process. But don't think that you have to go to some organization to actually hear us. Just pick up the phone or email us if you have a question. We really don't want you to hold off thinking about your application and getting something into us on waiting to see us. I hope that makes sense.
As a nonprofit association, we are currently working with a Native-owned business, but are still in the business development phase with them. We're planning to start actual crops over the winter. Does this make us ineligible due to not having grown crops yet?
You've got to drive into one of those 4 types of entities, and you've got to have charitable and educational purposes as the heart of your application. So I don't know that I know enough about your particular enterprise to think about how it might fit within those components, but we're going to get a lot of very specific questions like this one that are really unique to whatever an organization or a group of people are trying to do. All I can tell you is take a look at those eligible applicants and take a look at how we frame the targeted and the special emphasis funding, and make the case that you are aligning yourself with an eligible entity eligible for funding, and that the project is of a type that is on our radar for this go around.
Do educational institutions who have experience with the tribe other than the one they intend to partner with for this grant still qualify as an eligible entity?
I would think that they would, because they would have demonstrated or would be capable of demonstrating that they have knowledge of working with the native farming and ranching community. But again, don't leave it to chance, and don't leave it to us to assume. Make the case in your narrative for how you fit.
Is there a grant ceiling for individual proposals from educational organizations?
Now, if you actually look at the targeted areas, we have not specifically put together a ceiling. We have an available pool of funds for those types of projects, but we steered away from actually having a clearly identified ceiling. We want to see what folks are coming up with.
Does funding have to be for tribal members only, like legal, business consultants, experts in field?
It actually needs to be for Native farmers and ranchers predominantly. Yes, it needs to be. That doesn't mean that your entity can't serve other people, but for the project that you're seeking funding for, you've got to be driving into the Native farmer and rancher space.
Can we request salary for Native instructors if there are not FERTEP instructors available?
I may not know enough about what you're actually contemplating doing there. I'm not sure I know enough about your particular project. It sounds like you're trying to actually think about a project that wouldn't utilize FERTEPs in the lead, but that might have other instructors and seeking salaries for them. I would hope that you wouldn't try to use a different array of kind of playing with your budget and your project to avoid the FERTEP lead or the tribal college lead within your application project. So I'm not sure I know enough. I will be glad to put our thinking caps on and really think more specifically about that, but please don't hesitate to email us. You have our email, and just identify yourself as the owner of that question, and we'll be happy to try to think more specifically about it.
Can you speak to the difference between special emphasis projects and targeted grants?
The special emphasis areas were really around topic areas that the trustees and NAAF felt were important for kind of this moment in time. Those special emphasis areas may go away altogether in future years, or they may somewhat stay in place and have a different wrinkle from time to time. It's hard to say because what the trustees and NAAF are going to try to do is be responsive to the emerging needs and the present needs of Native farmers and ranchers all over Indian country. The targeted, if you actually look at them, they are targeted towards the eligible types of entities, and they really kind of speak to those 4 topic areas: business assistance, agricultural education, advocacy, and technical support. And again, as I said at the outset, this is for the 2019 request for applications. Whenever the next request for applications comes out, it very well could have a different focus. So just think about it. Think about it in what we're laying out in terms of our interests this year.
We found in a recent study that there's a lot of new revenue streams for ag and ag tourism. Would that be value added? It does not supplant ranching, but adds to the bottom line.
If you look at some of the literature around agritourism, and if you look at some of the activities around agritourism, probably for the last 30 years, it very often kind of falls into the realm of value added. You are adding value to a raw production system, be that either livestock or plants or hunting and gathering. So I would have to tell you that, in my opinion, the agritourism piece does fall squarely within the whole value-added component. Although some people think about value-added in terms of actually taking the raw product and doing something with it, like taking berries and making jam. But it's just a different way of kind of coming at what do you do with the raw product to add value, not only for the producer, but for the community's efforts in that area. And that can just take many forms. And sometimes agritourism is one of those platforms that does add value to the production systems that are out there in the food systems. So I would have to tell you that I believe it does add value. And if you look at the literature across the country in terms of also what Indian country is doing with agritourism, I would think that they think it's, the folks who are deeply involved in those issues also think agritourism is value added.
We spoke about resolutions and limited waiver of sovereign immunity. Do you have a template for either of those?
The templates was an avenue that we contemplated but decided not to go down. There is absolutely no way that Janie Hip can determine what every single tribal government wants in their resolution format. And so we hope that you respect that opaqueness of resolution formatting. I really think the best thing you can do is, if your entity is such that it requires a resolution of your tribal government, then you need to get in touch with the tribal legislative body's offices or your senior governmental offices and find out what they need in their resolution.
As an eligible grant recipient, are we able to apply for more than one project, 2 to 3 separate applications?
Yes, and you can also apply for one application with multiple projects in it. So up to you.
Did you say that 2 million is the maximum on the grant?
For some categories, yes. Yes.
When we discuss about access to credit, are we talking about literal access to credit such as loans, or are we talking about something like carbon credit?
The heart of the Keep Siegel case was access to loans. So at this point in time, we will take the carbon credit issue and kind of put a point on that and make sure that the trustees understand and know that it came up as one of our questions here today. But if you actually look at the Keep Siegel case, it drove into a lending piece. Carbon credits is one of those things that's been around a while and it continues to gather steam. But at this point in time, I believe if I were to respond on behalf of the trustees, I would likely tell you that it drives into lending.
Does the granting period of 2 years restrict an applicant to one application every 2 years, or can the entity who may have already received the first round apply for another project on year 2 of the first project for an entirely separate entity?
I think the best thing you can do, whoever put that question forward, is to fill out our survey and tell us that you think the flexibility should be there to apply for a brand new one in year 2. There's nothing in this application process for 2019 that would prevent that from happening. But again, the trustees have not started to actually think about how the 2020 application is going to be framed. So I think making sure we will advance this as a point that came up today, and we will let them know our preliminary response to y'all, but it really is up to them to frame how they move forward every year in this process. The other thing I want to mention, and this goes back to one of the previous questions, is this is just this year. This is a 19-year and counting. This is a 20-year spin down trust. So it's really important that we hear from you all, that we hear from all the eligible entity types, but that we also hear from Native farmers and ranchers about where they see this going and what they would like to see done. It is possible that the trustees decide to put a considerable amount more on the street for potential funding purposes in future years, but that is really up to them. And we just felt the need to get things rolling, get things moving this first year, 2019. But there's going to be all sorts of options and opportunities moving forward, and I can't tell you that next year's is going to look exactly like this in both funding types or amounts. So just keep that in mind.
Can NAAF funds be used as a match for other federal funding?
Yes, it is not federal money. The minute the case was settled and the funds were transferred out of the judgment fund, it lost its federal money status. So we've gotten this question quite a bit already, the staff here and I have, and it is not considered federal money, and it wasn't even all the way back to 2011. So yes, it can be used as match. And if you run across a problem in using it as match, you got to be able to actually be an awarded project to be able to use it as match. But if you run into a problem, then we can work with you to make sure that whoever you're working with understands the nature and status of the funds so that there isn't a problem.
For a new 501c3, does a fiscal sponsor with a track record of service for native ag need to be another 501c3? Or could it be an educational organization or a tribal government instead?
Can you say that again? I'm not sure I caught the first part of that.
For a new 501c3, does the fiscal sponsor with a track record of service for native ag need to be another 501c3? Or could it be an educational organization or tribal government instead?
Many times, beginning 501c3s that don't have their status yet actually do look to 501c3s as their fiscal sponsors. Mainly, I have found, mainly so that they can learn from and get capacity building help from the existing 501c3. But there's nothing in our application process that prevents you as a startup 501c3 that doesn't have status to actually work with one of the other eligible entity types. Just make yourself clear in the application. The other thing, Carly, I wanted to mention too, before we got into a couple more questions, is we actually mention it in the request for applications, but you should really always be thinking about how you can leverage the funds that you're seeking with other projects you're working on or other players or other collaborators. Just leverage. That's really important. We're thinking about that on behalf of all of NAAF, but we think you should too as well.
Could you give a better idea of the extent of track record of service that the board has in mind for the fiscal sponsor role, like a time of 5 years or 50 years?
They were not specific in the actual length of time a fiscal sponsor had to be in play with that status. They were not specific.
Can more than one person attend the annual grantee meeting?
We're going to need for you to cover in your budget one person. We will, you're welcome to bring another person out of other funds, but we will have to work with the awardees in that regard and make sure that as we support the conference as a whole, that we have the resources to actually do that. So I'm going to give you a provisional yes, but that could change based on how many funded applications we have and how many folks are going to be at the conference. But you need to put in your budget at least for one. If you want to bring another, then we'll negotiate that later. But I see no problem in that, other than we just need to think about overall capacity for the meeting itself. I will tell you though, Carly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when the FastTrack grantees and NAAF all got together a couple of months ago, it was a great meeting. The amount of work and the excitement of the projects that are were funded out of the Keep Eagle settlement early on in that FastTrack funding were really amazing. And I'm looking for this first 2019 RFA awardee group to be just as amazing. So I'm excited already for the grantee meeting. I know that's several months down the pike, but I think it's important for us to think about what we can gain from being together and actually sharing what we're doing and sharing the results of our work for the benefit of Native farmers and ranchers. That's where we have to keep driving.
Is a nonprofit Native American organization established under tribal law eligible for this fund?
Yes, but it matters how they're established under tribal law. So you got to go all the way back and look at those first slides around eligible entity. And if you've got any further questions about that, then just let us know.
Can a fiscal sponsor and the organization they are sponsoring each have an application for NAAF funding in the same round?
I can't see that we've prohibited that at all. For the same project, using the same budget, I think that would throw up some flags. But for different projects, I can't see why they wouldn't if they meet the eligible requirements.
In understanding that multiple tribal departments/programs would need to apply under the same grant application, is there an example of what constitutes being within the same organization? For example, we have folks from our tribal school systems, state cooperative extension office, and tribal departments. Any examples that can be provided will help us ensure that we do not submit an application out of compliance.
I think I understand the question. I think I'm understanding it to mean that within an overall umbrella, you have a lot of different offices, maybe within the tribe, that are working around food and agriculture, but they're just funded through different mechanisms. And the question, as I hear it, is, are we looking for an overarching application, or can you do individual applications? I think that's your choice. I think there's nothing in our RFA process that would prohibit an umbrella or the individual. You just got to make sure that they don't duplicate, number one. You got to make sure that the budgets are in alignment with the actual work. And I think we'd be looking for how they sit and complement one another without being redundant, not only in the work they're going to be doing, but also in the budget. So I think that's going to be a tricky one, but it's not impossible. You're just going to have to be very specific in your narrative and in your budget documents.
Does the full application have to be submitted in one work session, or can we upload part of the application and come back in another session to finish?
I think you can go in and you can work and you can save, and then you can come back and work and save. So if you I've done this in previous software systems like this, and the worst thing you can do is fail to save. So save often. And I would suggest that you hard copy all your documents and you just kind of keep tabs of having all your things in one place so that you don't get confused about where you left off. But yeah, you can go in and out of the system, and your final submittal is at the very end, and you'll know when you get there, but you can go in and save and come back.
This is one for Tony.
Is there a way to view the completed application before submitting? And if you give us one moment, we're going to get our technical expert here to give you your answer.
She's unmuting, right? She's unmuted. Go ahead, Tony.
You can't see it in what it would look like to the reviewer, but you can see all of your questions before you submit.
Thank you, Tony. Next question. Will only tribal colleges be eligible for this program, or will public institutions be considered?
Yeah, if you meet the definition of an educational organization under the Internal Revenue Code, which is the citation to the section in the Internal Revenue Code is in one of those early slides that identifies educational organizations, then you would be eligible. That's the way the trust agreement language is written. But, you also have to think about how you interface with Native communities. Have you worked with Native farmers and ranchers? There's some other kind of criteria in play here other than just that status.
Are the future webinars a repeat of this webinar, or will it have additional information?
It will have the same information, but there could be a whole different set of questions that are posed at the end and recorded at the end. So if you've got time, then sit through it again. The bulk of the slide deck you see will not change, but but the questions may. And so I just encourage you, even if you don't sit through the whole slide deck again, just at least go back and revisit the questions.
When should we expect to hear back about our proposal? And if awarded, when could we expect to receive the funds?
Our goal is to advise the successful applicants before the end of the year and to receive the funds. Hopefully, we would love to do it by the end of the year, but it realistically could be January. As quickly as possible.
I'm hearing Native and tribal. If the population we serve includes Latinx folks who identify as Indigenous and/or are intermarried with tribal families, are they still considered the population you want to serve?
I see, you have to think about this in terms of who were the original claimants in the Keep Siegel case. They were folks who were citizens of federally or state recognized tribes, but also individuals who identified as Native peoples. What is important in your question is what exactly is the population group you're actually going to be serving? And that's really what I would drive your application to really think clearly about, is how does the population you're serving actually have similarity to the original claimants of the Keep Siegel case? So I'm sorry that seems like a vague answer, but it's kind of hard to offer you a yes or no, up or down. When I don't know where you are, I don't know the nature of the full population you're serving, and I don't know how they relate back to the original claimants of the case. But we are going to try our best to be driving into that space of Native farmers and ranchers, Native food people, Indigenous food people. And so I just think I don't have enough information really to solidly answer that question, but I'm happy to talk offline with whoever brought it up, and we can put it into our FAQs when we have a chance to think about it a little bit more deeply. But it may depend, honestly, with who exactly who you're going to be serving.
Is industrial hemp an acceptable project to be funded, specifically grain/fiber varieties?
Industrial hemp is actually indicated as one of the 4 special focus areas, so special emphasis areas. So what we're looking for there is industrial hemp production system analysis. And go back to those slides and take a look at them and let us know if you have any more questions. But the industrial hemp piece is what is of most interest at this point in time.
What about tribally chartered corporations? Are they eligible?
They've got to have the educational and charitable purpose behind them. That's really an important piece of this puzzle because it drives into how we're allowed to use the funds themselves. So it matters very much whether that tribally chartered corporation is going to be partnering with an entity that clearly meets one of those 4 eligible entity types and what the purpose is of the funds that they're asking for.
We plan to apply with a fiscal agent who is also applying for NAAF grant. Will we be equally and separately considered based on our separate project goals?
I'm thinking of this is the same question we had previously. You would be separately considered. We have probably 1 minute left and we're going to time out. Do we have a few more questions? We have a lot more questions. So is there any way to extend our time? It doesn't cut off? Good. All right, well, we're on it. We're going to stay on as long as you stay on. So let's keep rolling through these questions. I was about to panic because I thought we had 1 minute. So anyway, we're still on if you're still on. So let's go.
Are IRA Section 17 corporations eligible?
You would have to look at the purpose for their work, how they're organized. They would not be ineligible, but are they doing charitable and educational work? And are they considered an instrumentality of tribal government?
We are a CDFI that is a 501c4, but have been considered and awarded for 501c3 grant requirement grants before. Is this a consideration for this grant?
I think what you should do is to and this applies to anyone who has a question about eligibility. If you've been awarded funds as a 501c3, even though that's not your status, then you should go ahead and let us know that when you file your application, provided a document that indicates that you've been funded as a 501c3 before.
Are nonprofits able to apply for funds for food sovereignty efforts or to provide food for tribal communities?
If you actually look at our special emphasis areas, the tribals, the food sovereignty and the traditional foods arena, you likely are going to fit more carefully within that special emphasis area. But again, it depends on your project design and how you actually set it up. So go back and take a look at that special emphasis area around food sovereignty and make sure that you fit the parameters of what we're looking for.
Are Native Hawaiians eligible as Native Americans for purposes of this funding opportunity?
Yes.
Do you need people to help you with the review of proposals from a technical point of view?
Absolutely. And if you are interested, we would have to make sure you don't have a conflict of interest, clearly. But if you're interested, just email us, and you can use the grants page, the grants email, to actually email us and let us know that you're interested. Absolutely.
Can the funds be used to study environmental quality and its impact on local farming and ranching operations?
Only if it is a part of a project that is within the parameters of what we're looking for this go around. So you would really need to think about business assistance, technical support, agricultural education, advocacy. You need to read through the targeted funding to the different types of entities or look at the special emphasis. There's probably several areas you might find yourself within, but it's up to you and your narrative to make the case that your project would meet what we're looking for.
During the webinar, specifically in the agricultural sciences part, you used a term several times, the bench. What are you talking about?
Thank you for asking that. I guess for those of us who play basketball, which hasn't been me for a really long time, we know, or football for that matter, we know what the bench is. The bench is who's out there who is ready to step into our roles. When I think about it for me, I think about who's coming up behind us, who is prepared to make food and agriculture their life's work or part of their life's work, and who on our bench can we put in to actually keep this ball rolling and build better and more sustainable food systems for all our people. So when I say bench, that's what I mean. For those of you who maybe haven't done organized sports in your lifetime, you might not have a sense of what that is, but that's what I mean, is who else can we tap to bring along and to be in this space with us as we all move forward. And every coach likes to look back and see some people sitting on the bench ready to go in. And so as I look around Indian country, there's a lot of folks out there who are getting involved in food and agriculture in new ways. So I know we're going to have a bench, but we just got a lot of work to do in that space to make sure that we have folks who can fill every crevice, because there's a lot to do and there's so much potential for all Native nations in food and agriculture that we need skill sets across the board. Not just plows and cows, right? But everything, market people, computer people, advertising people, you name it. It is literally just filled with opportunities, but that's what we're looking for. And the science people.
Are we able to hire consultants that are non-tribal to teach or lead Native farmers and ranchers based on their expertise?
That's up to you. We would hope that they would have experience working with Native communities and with tribal members and indigenous farmers and ranchers and food people, but it really is your call as to who you hire as a consultant.
At this time, I invite you to take this one last chance to send us a question. If you haven't already, please do, and we'll ask it on air. If not, you're always welcome to call us at the number provided or send your question to our email box, grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org.
You want to give the telephone number again?
Yes. Our telephone number is 479-445-6226. Again, that is 479-445-6226.
Is that all of the questions? Oh, ooh, one more coming in.
I think we already addressed this one, but just for clarity, when should we expect to hear back about our proposal? And if awarded, when would we receive?
There's going to be a lot of activity in the latter part of 2019. So we're hoping that everyone can hear about whether they've been selected or not before the end of 2019 and move through to make sure that we get funds moving out the door as soon thereafter as possible. I would love to give you a date specific, but it's just absolutely not feasible or possible. But that's our target. End of the year. Calendar year.
Okay, everyone, thank you for your questions. Again, we have 2 more webinars scheduled, one for next Tuesday, same time, same place. You register for that using the link on the website or that you see now on your screen. And then the last scheduled webinar is September 3rd, Tuesday at 2 to 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. One more question has come in. If you have more than one project in a proposal, can more than one person attend the annual meeting?
Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. I think it goes back to my original answer, which was we know that we've got to have a lead person at the actual grantee meeting, and we'll accommodate additional folks as much as we can, but we'll need to figure out, how many applicants are successful and how many folks we're actually looking at, and we'll have to get back to the awardees on that. I would love it, but it may be problematic in terms of space, but just know that that's not a solid no. We'll just have to deal with it when we can, later on down the line.
I'd like to remind you that a recording of this webinar will be available on our website tomorrow. And you'll also, if you registered for this webinar, you'll get an email to the email that you used to register with a link to that recording. So if you'd like to revisit anything that was said here, you may do that.
So this is Janie, and we're going to be signing off now. And thank you all so much for staying here the whole time and being so interested in posing some really great questions. Again, if you've got any other questions that come up after you've had a chance to think about it or working through your application, just don't hesitate to email us or call us and let us know. As I said earlier, we're going to do a deep dive on all the questions we received and answers, and we will supplement our frequently asked questions document, so check back there. If you have any technical issues, Marie, Tony, and our other staff here are willing and able to walk you through that, but just don't wait until the last minute. I meant to say that earlier. Please don't wait till the last minute. Do your best, I think, to try to get your application in early. I know you've been sitting on a lot of really great ideas for a long time, and so now's the time to push those forward. But people are people, and a lot of people are going to wait to the last minute. Try not to do that because it'll make you want to pull your hair out. But if you must, the system is it's very well capable of handling things on the last day, but we think that's really not doing a good service to you or your application if you wait till the last minute. So try to get there early. Anyway, let us know if you have any questions, and call or email anytime. We're glad to help. Thank you.